Good morning, Black New Mexico, and welcome to another in the series, COVID-19, Living While Black with COVID-19. We have an exciting lineup for you today, and as always, a shout out to the government of the state of New Mexico for making this podcast possible. We want to also acknowledge that the Office of African Americans, which is the sponsor of this podcast, has a new website. You can find that at oAAA.state.nm.us. That's the new website. You can go there to get incredible information about what's going on around the state of New Mexico. And among things that are happening around the state of New Mexico, this weekend, Juneteenth celebrations. There's several of them happening, and they look to be really exciting events. So if you go to the OAAA website, you'll find the link to all of those happenings. Before we go on, let me start with our esteemed representative from the New Mexico Department of Health, Sonia Smith. Sonia, I'm going to hand it over to you for our weekly announcements.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Hey, Jim, thank you so much.
Hey there.
So here it goes. I want to make sure that everybody stays up to date. So as of yesterday, these are the numbers that we have for our COVID testing. So we have tested over 263,000 people across the state. We have 9,723 positive cases. Unfortunately, we've lost 435 people to this virus. But again, we always like to make sure that we bring the good news. The good news is that we've had over 4,000 people to recover from this. So again, testing is important. And so as that equates to our Black numbers, we have approximately 198 people, approximately 200 people who are positive in the state. So again, we will continue our efforts to test in the Black community. So just to kind of round this out a little bit, let you know where we've been with testing and where we're going with testing, because it's important for you to stay informed, is we've been to Hobbs, we've been to the Elks Lodge and to New Hope Full Gospel Missionary Baptist Church here in Albuquerque. We've been to Alamogordo, Las Cruces, Rio Rancho, and this past weekend we were down in Clovis. So this coming week we'll be back in Hobbs, and then we'll be in Roswell on Saturday. So you will be seeing flyers that come out from the Department of Health because partner with the Office of African American Affairs on our efforts here. Jim, and just one other thing I would like to say is that, in our travels, we are dealing with a lot of people who are still afraid to test. And some of the things that we hear are that the testing that we use for the nasal pharyngeal swab is a mechanism to insert a chip, into Black people from the government. And I can tell you unequivocally, that is not happening.
Right.
And I invite anybody who has questions to please reach out to me. I'll be glad to put my contact information chat if you want to talk about it. Coming on this program every week certainly helps. But we want to let people know that COVID is still very real, and our community in particular are still being widely affected by this. So we want to dispel myths, as you would say, because I know you cover that as well. So let's please make sure we get good information out there in the community. So that's really all I have. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Sonia. Thank you very much for that information. And that was the one myth. No, that's one of two myths that I was going to address today. The other one being that just because we've got the slow roll of an opening and people returning to work and limited occupation in restaurants, outdoors, that does not mean that the battle is over. We still need to practice social distancing. We need to wear our masks. We need to wash our hands frequently. And if you have the option, we need to just stay home and be safe. So let's make clear that nothing that's happening in terms of reopenings should be taken as a signal that everything is okay. It is not. Let's stay safe out there. So let's go on. We've got an incredible speaker today. She's my homegirl from the city of Chicago. Yay, yay, yay. South Side too. Yay, South Side. Viola Henry. Viola is a native of the South Side of Chicago. She's the mother of 3 amazing children and a bonus mother to 1 and a wife. As the chief executive officer and founder of Unbossed Consulting, she works to empower communities through education. For the last 14 years, Viola has served as an advisor for the Greater Albuquerque National Society of Black Engineers Junior chapter in Albuquerque. That's the junior chapter here in Albuquerque. And I have to tell you, what an incredible group of kids come through there and benefit from participating in the work that's done in that chapter. This community-based national award-winning competition, trophy-winning program executes a 100% high school graduation rate and a 100% college attendance rate with student participants. Viola attended the University of New Mexico and focused on areas of organizational communication and Africana studies. Viola is a community volunteer, a Black womanist, and active member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Through her journey, she remains focused on the greater good for all humanity while embracing the unique qualities of others. Just a reminder to go into the chat room if you have questions or comments. That lets us know you're there and also gives Viola a chance to respond. With no further delay, let me turn it over to my friend, my homegirl, Viola Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. I appreciate the wonderful introduction. I am thankful to have this opportunity. And I thank everyone who has taken time out of their very busy schedules to attend this call. The information that you hear here today, I hope will give you insight, possibly igniting a fire that will encourage you to support true change in understanding the impact of COVID-19 and education while we support our children. Thank you. Next slide. So the topics that we will cover today, we're going to talk about the ultimate or several of the impacts on the learning in our community specifically. We're going to talk about the impact of how to counter the impacts of the learning loss caused by COVID-19. We will take some time to review the gaps in our education system and how COVID-19 may further divide students. We will give you information on how to best spend your summer and then also provide resources to families as a next step. So kind of where you will go from here. May I have the next slide, please? So challenges, and sometimes we talk about these as opportunities. But today I'm going to focus on the word challenge. So many challenges can be identified through the onset of COVID-19. As we list these challenges, I ask that each of you, if you have questions about information that I'm sharing, I ask that you all please reach out. You may place questions in the chat box, and then there will also be a link to this information that will be placed on our on the website for the Office of African American Affairs. May I have the presentation sent back, please? Thank you. So in March, New Mexico, as well as the rest of the country, experienced full school closures. Please advance the slide. Thank you. Many districts, including districts in New Mexico, were not prepared for these closures. Additionally, districts scrambled to create learning models to meet the need of students during uncertain times. Specific impacts experienced in the Black community include access issues. Many families did not have access to the required equipment, i.e. laptop computers, Chromebooks, web cameras, or internet. And these challenges definitely ensured that our community would continue to follow or to fall behind further. Positive actions were taken by the City of Albuquerque as well as Albuquerque Public Schools. Students in the district were issued Google Chromebooks. The City of Albuquerque created Wi-Fi hotspots on our city buses to allow students to connect to the internet to complete coursework. This was a great attempt at addressing this unexpected issue. But the reality of this action, families were issued a single Chromebook. Many families have more than one child. So we have a family of 6 where 4 students are expected to share a single Chromebook and complete coursework during the school day. Is this equitable? Some schools took 3 weeks or more to transition to online platforms and efforts for students to complete their coursework. The impact of this delay is that students lost valuable time for learning. In just a short time, we will discuss what to do to counter the effects of the loss of learning. Additionally, there was not input on these decisions from community members or other stakeholders, and this leaves our community, specifically the Black community, at a further deficit. Next slide, please. So as I continue with the challenges, some districts began to speak about alternative grading options. And the first one was pass or fail options. So this has positive and negative impacts. I'm offering information to just help empower you in supporting your children and the children in your community. So what are pass or fail classes? So the traditional grading system, of course, as you know from your own experience in school, if you receive a 90% or higher, it's considered an A, 80% or higher, it's considered a B, and so on. The advantages of taking a pass or fail class could be that there's not a direct impact on a grade point average. However, if your student participates in any type of advanced placement classes or AP classes or honors classes, this option would basically wipe away the hard work that they have done. When you look at pass or fail classes, this is usually a model that's used at the college level, but some districts have moved to it to help as a way of compensating for COVID-19, and that is problematic, again, if you are taking these advanced classes. Please advance the slide. So as we look at this, I wanted to briefly take a moment while I had your ear to look at the graduation requirements. So the state of New Mexico, and this information is from my favorite website, aps.edu. I think it's great to verify information. So the state of New Mexico requires 25 completed credit hours for students to graduate. They'd like 3.5 in social studies, 3 science credits, 4 English credits, 4 credits in math, 1 in physical education, a half a credit in health, and 8 credits in electives. The area that I wanted to focus in is this 1 credit hour that's required for career or workplace readiness or a language other than English. Next slide, please. So when we look at and take a closer look at the career and workplace readiness or a language other than English, and this is directly from the aps.edu website, verbatim, it reads, at least 1 credit taken by the student must be honors, advanced placement, dual enrollment, or distance learning. These courses can be taken to satisfy any of or other credit requirements in addition to this requirement. And what I'd like to do is to highlight this because this means we have some options. trends that we are seeing within our schools is that students are being enrolled in advanced placement credit or advanced placement classes without input from the student or the parent. Additionally, students don't necessarily have a demonstrated performance level that would indicate that they should be in an advanced placement course. Now, advanced placement courses may be appropriate for many students, but it's not necessarily appropriate for every student. When I ask myself, why does this happen? I can't help but to wonder if in the state of New Mexico, if a student performs undergrade level or a student is advanced, it's both considered special education. And so what is the impact on a school if a school can route 100% of their students through special education programming? I don't know. So just kind of keep that in mind as we advance to the next slide. So when we look at enrollment decisions, I want to encourage everyone to become an active participant and to ensure that you know what courses your student is taking, why they're taking it, and how they're taking it. Many students that are enrolled, they may struggle, or it may just have an overall negative impact if there's already a history of struggling and now you're forced into these advanced placement courses. Next slide, please. So another area that I would like to highlight is that sometimes we believe that our school district or the school will provide everything that our students need in order to prepare them for college. Again, New Mexico only requires 1 credit hour of career readiness is what it's labeled as. And so I visited my favorite website again, which is aps.edu. And so I'd like to do a little bit of math with you. So APS has 21 high schools in the metro area. These high schools consist of 9th through 12th grade students only. Currently, there are only 5 college and career counselors that are staffed employees. And so we have to ask the question, do staffed college and career counselors have the needed resources, training, and time to effectively complete this work? And this is a huge area because our students may not be getting the support that they need. In fact, I argue that they don't receive the support. And so we're going to advance to the next slide and do a little bit of math, and then you all will be able to weigh in. So when we look at the math, we're going to use nice whole numbers just because it's easy. So one, we have 21 high schools within the district. Students that are supported in the 21 high schools is 22,947. The days of instruction that are available are 176 days. So college and career counselor staff, we're going to use a nice round number and say we have 21. So in this example, we are saying we have 1 in every school. So in theory, every student has access to college and career counselors. Next slide, please. So as we do the math, 22,947 students divided by 21 schools gives us an average of 1,092 students. So if we have 1 career counselor to serve 1,092 students annually, what does that look like for an average day? So when we divide 1,092 students into 176 days of available instruction, the total is approximately 6.7 students daily that need to be serviced. Now the school day is 7 hours long. So in theory, 1 counselor can service 1,092 students in 176 days at 6.7 per day and 7 hours available. So this would mean that the career and counselor coach has enough time to meet with every student exactly once in the academic year. Is this equitable? Next slide, please. So the reason that I bring these to your attention is that COVID-19 didn't cause this problem, but it will further highlight and deepen it's going to deepen the level of makeup that we have to do to ensure our students are being serviced. So when we talked about the requirements for graduating high school, those requirements are not the same requirements that are needed to enter most four-year institutions. And this becomes important because is our goal just to graduate high school, or is our goal to ensure that every student has access to whatever post-secondary education plan they would like? I pulled some brief statistics for you. When we look at the University of Chicago entrance requirements, they require 4 years of English, 4 years of math. On that math requirement, they would like math completed through calculus or through pre-calculus. That is not a requirement of APS. APS simply just says 4 years of math. And so you've got to be vigilant about which courses are being selected. Science, they would prefer 3 to 4 years, social studies, 3 years. But on the foreign language requirement, they're looking for 2 to 3 years. New Mexico requires 1 year. And so this is a huge disparity, because what we would have is students who can graduate high school but are not necessarily qualified to obtain or to pursue whatever their next level of education plan is. The numbers are similar when we look at Ivy League schools. Harvard, for example, they would like 4 years of a foreign language. And so I share this information because our school district, they are issuing student schedules, but it's being issued based upon what the recommendation for graduation is, which is not problematic in itself. It's problematic if our goal is larger than just graduating high school. Schedules are often created with very little input from students or parents, and so it really requires a community who will step in and say, this is what we need. Please be an active participant in your students' learning and course selection. Please know that school staff, they're limited in the resources, and that our individual expectations may fall short if we have a blind trust or assume students are getting the support and guidance required for ultimate success. Next slide, please. So the next major impact I wanted to discuss about the impacts of COVID-19 is the cancellation of standardized testing. Students who were scheduled to take the SAT or PSAT in school in April experienced full cancellations. There currently is not a plan to administer the SAT virtually. There is a plan to administer the ACT virtually. However, this past school year, our Education Secretary, Ryan Stewart, announced that New Mexico is a full SAT-only state. And so with that, students who were scheduled to take these tests did not have access to them. So sophomores, juniors, and seniors may not have the necessary scores to apply for college, as well as to enter into the merit-based scholarship pool. Which is a one opportunity kind of testing. And so I'll ask you again, is this equitable? Next slide, please. So let's move our discussion on how we counter some of the negative impacts of COVID-19 within our community, and then also how can we utilize our summer to ensure that the students are making the best out of them. So the first thing is I want you to really make a plan on how you are going to spend your summer. Students should be reading daily. And there are a series of organizations who have online reading books or reading groups or book clubs or things of that sort. Enroll students into summer programming. Many options are available based upon virtual limitations because of COVID-19. These programs may be free. If there is a cost, I encourage you to ask if there's a scholarship. Do not allow the posting of a fee be the reason that you don't apply. Also look for programming that is specific to what your child may enjoy. We want to make sure that we're keeping our students engaged, and we want to kind of counter the weeks of learning that has been lost. Additionally, there are virtual electronic programs that students can participate in. I've highlighted the Khan Academy for several reasons. I like Khan Academy because it's free, but also Khan Academy will issue certifications. So as students work through different topics, Khan Academy will certify that they are well-versed and proficient in different areas. These certifications can be submitted as part of a college admissions process to show I do know the information, even though I may be lacking the standardized test scores. Additionally, I encourage you to enroll students into any type of SAT preparation courses. These courses can be very expensive. There are some free options and classes, but students need to have practice in completing and working through this test. I would like to say consider joining GA NSBE email listserv. SAT preparation courses were offered to students free of charge this past year. It is my hope that funding will provide and allow for all of our students to partake in that testing. Our students need to learn the strategy of taking these tests, as well as understanding how to manage time during these tests. Sadly, this is the standard that we have because we do have to negotiate the current systems that are in place. And so the number one way that we can begin to work on that is to offer training and consistency and repetition for our students. Next slide, please. So Ms. Deborah Wright and I have created what we are referring to as a resource guide. The resource guide will give you step-by-step information, but it will also help support you in how to have these very important conversations with your children's school. Additionally, in the resource guide, we've created a section if you have a student who has differing abilities. So perhaps your student has an individual education plan, perhaps your student has additional accommodations that are necessary. Perhaps you would like your student to be tested because they're currently not receiving services. So what we have is a resource guide that will be available for download for everyone. It was carefully crafted and put together, and the information will allow you to connect yourself with resources within our community to help support your student in going through that process. Oftentimes, these processes need to begin earlier. For some evaluations, it could take one full academic year up to 10 years to receive those services. And this is really important to get on top of early. A student in the district for Albuquerque Public Schools may not receive intervention services until they perform 2 full letter grades below where they are. And so in essence, we're saying a student may have to absolutely fail before we'll give them additional assistance, and that should not be our norm. As a community, I think that we should come together, support families, and then also support by sharing resources to really ensure everyone has access to what they need. I've also created a list of questions that you can ask your high school, and also how to navigate this process. So how do you ask for a meeting with the college and career counselor, considering the time restraints of what that counselor may be dealing with? What do you do if there's not one available at your school? What are the other alternatives? And so as opposed to just keeping the information to ourselves, we are making this information public. It is my hope that you all will find just a piece that will help support and encourage and help in the transition as your students move forward. Next slide, please. So at this time, I'd like to answer any questions that we have about the information that I've presented so far. Your questions. I think it's important that that we kind of highlight that our partnership with the school district needs to be from a supportive nature. Resources are limited, resources are tight, and so we've got to work with what we have. Dr. Martin, did you have a question?
Oh, I have loads of questions. But before I begin my questions, I'd like to thank you for providing us with some rich information that deals with the inequities that exist in our society pre and post COVID. And as you mentioned before, this SARS COVID-2 has really sort of exposed the vulnerabilities and frailties in our society. And so community-based organizations, nonprofit organizations such as yourself, such as the one that you have, are important in terms of bringing information like this to the communities. And so while I'm waiting for some of the folks to add their questions, I'm going to sort of just kind of give a little bit of a commentary also too, maybe spark a little more controversy about this. But as you talk about this, you mentioned that in your background, your background is in education and Africana studies. And as we link those two disciplines together, I see the need for bringing that information regarding Africana studies much more closely into the curriculums that have impact on our children. As we know that, when you live in socially toxic environments, that has an effect on early childhood brain development. And disease doesn't happen when you're young, when you're old. It starts when you're young. And so when our children are exposed to these toxic conditions, it has an impact on their academic development, their brain development, and it also has an impact on academic and what that means for careers in terms of social determinants of health, as well as their adult health. So education is the strongest predictor of health and well-being. And you've mentioned that in the APS format, they only have a half year of health education, exposure health education, a half year's credit. And in that sense, when you think about, when pandemics or other types of disease conditions exist, whether they're chronic or infectious disease, people don't have enough information to make decisions about themselves, which is why we dealt with, in the first part of this conversation, the myth of people thinking that, and I understand fear with that also too, don't get me wrong, but the misinformation that exists about what testing is and what it isn't, or some people, you'd be surprised how many people have actually drank bleach, to try to kill themselves based upon the president's recommendation. No, this stuff is going on. This type of ignorance is happening. And it's happening because we're not getting in our rules. So I think, and again, I'm still waiting for people to come in with the chat questions and things, so I'll keep going. That is, as we talk about this, do you think that perhaps there's too much emphasis on STEM as opposed to STEAM H? And could you explain to people what the differences are between STEM alone and what STEAM H is?
Absolutely. Great information. And I do want to, if possible, do justice to your commentary and kind of address several things that you brought up. So the first area that we talked about in combining Africana studies in our education system, I believe that a thorough or a more in-depth understanding of Africana studies creates a sense of self. And so our students don't receive this information traditionally in the school system. The information is just absent. And so going to your next point, I believe that our children attend school, but education really has to happen at home. I am my children's first teacher, and as with others, we really have to go back to that model where we're ensuring that the education of self, the education of history is occurring there. The information or the topic of the content of the curriculum that our students receive, that's another level, right? As parents, we often kind of accept what's kind of coming toward us, but our students don't have a full sense of what really is out there. They only have the small piece of the pie that's being presented. When we look at STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that's one area. When we look at STEAM, that's science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and also the inclusion of the arts, which are very important. Students need to be dynamic in their approach, but also informing their identities through an understanding of Africana studies can explore how each of those areas will further benefit them. So to identify with science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or a segment of the arts. All of that is uniquely important, but all of that may not be available. As you can see, there wasn't an art requirement for graduation within the state of New Mexico. And so that is an area that may be completely missed. When we look at Africana studies, and I'll get off of this, but y'all know this is my passion. We ascend from mathematicians, astrologers, the first doctors. There's such a rich history in there that it's hard to deny that any one of our students cannot identify with any area of that. And so we've got to create programming and then also financially support programming for those who are doing the work. I can speak for the Greater Albuquerque National Society of Black Engineers. We've been in this community for 20 years and we are not a funded program. So the work we do, we make it happen.
Right.
The students, but we're not, we don't receive a check from city, state, local, national. We don't receive those checks, but we still get the work done.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I appreciate that because I knew that you had that perspective. And as we talk about STEAM H, we're also talking about the humanities. So we covered that well in that sense. And it brings up the whole issue in terms of that we were not kidnapped and brought here to be educated. We were brought here to be trained to serve the masters. So we need a new paradigm in some ways. Now, I do have one question for you.
Sure.
And this question is from Sonia Smith. And actually, it's for everyone, but you know, this is a group. This is community learning project. So,
Right.
And I've got to pause because my internet connection is unstable. But did you have a chance to compare admission requirements for UNM and other colleges in New Mexico?
I do. And so so through my business, what I do is college education and preparation. UNM recently made some changes to the admission requirements where they've removed the course recommendations from their website. So if you Google to see what that is, it's not there. And I believe that there are some accommodations that are being made because of COVID-19. And there are multiple programs that will help to route our students into schools in New Mexico. But the tragedy of that is that if a student has a dream of something greater than just going to school in New Mexico, they may not have the required coursework or preparation in order to apply and be admitted. Of course, they have a great chance at being admitted into schools in New Mexico. So I attended UNM, so I'm not going to say it's a lesser school. I received a there. My professors are on the line. But if a student wants different, then they may not have access to different.
Right.
Okay. Well, you know, as you think about this also too, we know that California, for example, has been very progressive, and they're doing away with the SAT because of the cultural bias and all the other issues that go with that. So is New Mexico get on board with that also too? Or are we going to continue to be relegated to having the worst type of educational statistics or being compared with Mississippi all the time? Commentary, you know, just something food for thought there.
It's a great question. It's a great question. And there is a large list of schools that I have that are no test schools. So University of Chicago, for instance, that I highlighted is no test, no loan school. And so in that case, that would be a school where you can submit something different. You could submit a piece of artwork. You could submit something else in place of testing. I don't know that testing will be removed completely because it's a business. At the end of the day, it's a business.
Modification aspects of it. Not because education is not considered a human right.
Correct. It should be. I think internet access should be considered a utility. It shouldn't be an extra, because those who don't have access to it are definitely falling further behind.
And at some point, we have to consider education a human right and not a commodity as we move through this, which follows in line with our ancestral teachings. You know, this is really interesting stuff. I mean, because education is the most robust predictor of health and well-being. And so if we fail at this level, we're doomed for more failure and failures, failed states and fractured states in many ways also too. So you have an important business to push forth with this. When I was a kid, I learned to read early, and I loved to read, and I would go to the library. But one of the things that was really interesting when I moved to New York was that I'd never seen bookmobiles before.
Mobile library.
Right.
And that might be a nice idea right now for the summertime things for certain neighborhoods, is to get donation of books, get an old van or something for the libraries or the systems, go to different neighborhoods and have the children have the opportunity to borrow books and sit out under a tree and read and do other types of things. We need to be a little bit more progressive and creative with this also too.
I think that's a great point. And Dr. Martin, I will encourage you and I invite you to view the aps.edu website. Listed on there, when you look at the number of elementary schools that are supported by APS, and then I want you to take a look at the number of elementary schools that are considered Title I schools. We are with about 70% of elementary schools being Title I schools, which tells me very early on we already have a huge deficit, and it only greater as we matriculate through to the higher levels of grades.
Well, I care deeply about this, because of, it does affect the community and the children and the youth and what have you, but it also has an impact on part of my job right now in terms of workforce development. How do I get young African-American children to think more thoughtfully about health professions education, not just necessarily being a doctor or nurse, but all the other areas of healthcare education. So we've got a big job ahead of us, COVID or not.
Absolutely. And
I'm still waiting for more questions. So.
That's okay. So I think that given the system that we have, I think this is the time where we stress test the system. So this is the time where everyone should be coming in and requesting and demanding somewhat these types of services to ensure I have college planning, to ensure that I have the appropriate courses, the schools. It is a blind trust that we have with our schools that is problematic.
And it's not just the four-year schools. We should be thinking about the community colleges also too.
Well, right.
Some people don't really want to get a four-year degree. So,
plan. So
whether community college is one of the best bargains in America.
Absolutely. But again, any post-secondary plan. So it could be community college. It could be joining the military. It could be a vocational school. My point is that a student may be limited from pursuing any post-secondary education plan they have if we don't ensure that they have the proper foundation.
Well, let me ask you another burning question. Because earlier you mentioned the positive counselors and involved in the schools and things. And I may be wrong, but I'm starting to believe that counseling hasn't changed much since I was in elementary school or high school or college.
Well, I don't know what the experience was when you were in college. I think you may have a couple years on me.
I'm an old man. That's okay. Go ahead.
But I don't recall ever having a counselor bring me in to say, let's plan your future. Let me hear about
Only once I can recall in high school.
But this should be an everyday question, an everyday conversation. And if we don't have it, I'm sorry?
No, go on, please.
If we don't have it and we're not receiving it in the school, we need to connect with our community partners and see where we can help supplement that area of education. So it may mean that you have to have an advocate, someone who can work you or walk you through those processes. Well,
you hit upon something that was very important earlier in this conversation when you mentioned the role of families and not depending on the schools and systems on that level. And from the perspective of Africana studies, when we look at the notion of African womanism, we know that women and mothers are the first teachers, So if women and young ladies aren't getting the education that they need, they can't teach their children either. I'm not putting blame on them, but we have to make sure that young women are receiving all the opportunities available to them, to become educated and knowledgeable. And then that will spur the men on to get an education too, because what woman wants to be bothered with dumb man? Hard to like. I was going to say something else, but this notion of, and I think, and I'm going to shout out to the Deltas here. You sisters have put together, like the other Divine Nine and members and things of that nature. But you've been focusing on education for a long time, and you play critical roles with that also too. So I would say to continue to honor that tradition and model the behaviors so that others will follow you.
If I could interject a question real quick for you, Viola, and anybody else, back to the topic of Title I schools.
Yes, sir.
have we seen any indication that in Title I schools or Title I settings, is there, are we experiencing a deficit in the type of education, the quality of education that's delivered in Title I schools compared to other schools?
That's a great question. And sadly, I don't know that I'm the professional to answer that question. I will connect you with one. So when we look at Title I in general, we know that there are additional resources, additional programming made available. I have some experience with the elementary schools here in Albuquerque, and I think that a little bit more of a personal delivery is happening versus just a general education. And so I don't think it's the quality of the education that's being delivered that's problematic in a Title I school. I think it's being strapped for resources. And so when you have the label of Title I, now you have a new set of regulations and requirements. And so then we're kind of in this cycle where we're trying to make sure we're meeting these requirements, but at the cost of what? Is it at the cost of staff? Is it at the cost of personnel? Is it at the cost of supplemental programming? Maybe we need a Saturday school, but now we don't have enough resources to implement that. Perhaps we have issues of food insecurity. There's so many challenges, and our hardworking educators in these Title I schools, and in many of our schools, it's just the job that we're asking of them. Based on my math, that simple math problem, you can see it is just not executable. It's not reasonable. It's not rational. And so we have to recognize that it may not be a rational approach, and we've got to do different.
So I'm concerned then that, is there a reallocation of resources? Are the resources originally targeted for Title I schools being reallocated over places, or are we actually seeing a depletion in resources for Title I schools?
Great question, and I am not going to step on that one.
That's one.
Good.
All right, good for you, but that's one that we
should.
need to look into. Yeah.
May I interject, because that was going to be my next question, because you mentioned resources so many times before, and Jim, in a very politically astute way, phrased the question very, very diplomatically in that sense. No, because we can be very critical about that. Why is there such a scarcity of resources for schools? If schools are so critically important, why are we defunding schools?
That's right.
And so that means we have to look upstream and look at policies that don't exist, and say, hey, folks, we need to hold you accountable for this.
Absolutely. And it's my hope that this discussion today will trigger some of that. I really wanted to take the time to kind of bring light to this, because this is something that's not talked about in general. We don't analyze the quality of the requirements that are being given.
Well, I've been notified that we have 10 minutes left for this discussion, and there aren't any other questions so far, so we can explore this idea in some more detail if you like.
Sure, I'm here for you.
Yes.
So let's tackle Jim's question. Believe it or not, I mean, Black Lives Matter.
If
Black Lives Matter, education matters also too.
Okay, well, that's been
the pain of our existence in this country, that we were not afforded the opportunity to pick up a book and read and to become knowledgeable.
But the problem is that we're focusing at the school level, and I don't think it's hardworking educators that are problematic. I think the requirements. So what is principals grading scorecard that has them executing curriculum or executing programming in the way that it is? What does that look like? Are they being held accountable to something that's not reasonable? Therefore, we have to sacrifice something else. I don't think the problem is at the school level. I really believe that we have hardworking educators and administrators. I really think it's higher up.
It's systemic. I mean, you think about it. In 57, the Russians sent Sputnik up into space, and the United States decided we have to compete with the Russians. We're falling behind in science and technology. So that meant everyone had to learn calculus, whether they wanted to use it or not. And that said that they taught it with the idea that everybody was going to be an engineer. Not everyone is going to be an engineer or scientist. So not everyone needs to learn calculus at that level.
our students, if we look at the statistics for African American or Black students compared to their peers, they are suspended at a higher rate, they are expelled at a higher rate. Testing scores, interestingly, in elementary schools in the lower grades, they outperform their peers. But something happens in this transition where when we get to high school, they're performing well below. So what is that, and how do we fix it? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was talking about that in an earlier discussion today, and it seems like one of the things that's missing, and I know that several people have been making attempts to get this to happen, is that there probably needs to be an introduction of genuine restorative justice in these schools, as a formal program, so that we can avoid the suspensions and the expulsions and police engagement that too many of our kids are exposed to on a regular basis. But this harkens back even to when I was in public schools, when I was in elementary school, or when I was in high school. It's the same. These are the same problems. And again, Dr. Martin is right when he said it's systemic. So it harkens back to the institutional racism that our education system experiences, has in reality here. And this is probably the next big frontier after policing that we probably need to tackle, is how do we tackle and dismantle institutional racism in our education system.
Absolutely.
The damage that's been done there is just incredible, and it's got to be undone if we're talking about having any chance with our posterity.
I absolutely agree with you.
Well, folks, we have about 2 to 3 minutes left, I believe.
Right.
And so, Viola, I want to thank you again for bringing these insights to us and helping us to have this important conversation about what our next steps should be and what we should look for. And before I turn this back over to Jim, I just want to say that regarding the Juneteenth messages that he put forth earlier, people, don't forget, you still need to wear masks and you still need to practice social distancing.
Absolutely.
Even though some of them may be virtual, but for those who are live, wear your mask in crowded rooms and practice 6 feet distancing, 2 meters. For those of you who don't like the imperial system, use the metric system, 2 meters.
2 meters, right? That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Thank you.
It should be at least 12 feet, not 6 feet, but that's another story.
I want to thank you all for having me, and I thank our community partners who did attend this call. I appreciate the support, and if there are any future conversations or discussions that we would like to have, please consider me. I'm available.
Thank you so much, Viola, and we encourage all of our listeners and viewers to begin to check in with the OAAA website for our remaining podcasts for the month of June. Check that schedule. We'll be getting those announcements out. And as always, this important and valuable podcast will be on YouTube beginning tomorrow. So we thank you all again. Thank you for sticking with us. We thank you for your questions and comments. And we, as always, encourage you to stay safe and be healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.